General William Westmoreland once declared that the Medal of Honor recipients of Vietnam represented the finest examples of American courage under fire. Today, with access to previously classified after-action reports and modern battlefield analysis, military experts are discovering that even Westmoreland didn't know the full extent of what these men accomplished. Declassified North Vietnamese Army documents now reveal that at Ia Drang, American forces faced 3 full regiments instead of the single regiment commanders believed they were fighting. These newly available records show tactical decisions and acts of heroism that remained buried in classified files for decades. But the most striking discovery may be simpler than complex battlefield analysis. The basic numbers that most Americans know about Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients have quietly changed. The hidden numbers, updated Vietnam Medal of Honor statistics. Recent archival research has revealed that the official count stands at 268 Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients, not the 246 figure that appears in most history books. This total includes 235 awards granted during the war years and 33 additional recognitions awarded after 1973. Military archivists working with previously inaccessible classified documents have confirmed these additional recipients through a painstaking process that began when the National Archives implemented new digitization protocols for Vietnam-era documents in 2018. The discovery process revealed systematic problems that buried heroic actions in bureaucratic failures for over half a century. Military historians gained access to after-action reports that had been classified at levels beyond what previous researchers could review. These documents contain detailed accounts of heroic actions that were witnessed, documented, and recommended for the Medal of Honor, but never processed through the award system. The classification levels were so restrictive that even senior military officials conducting awards reviews in the 1970s and 1980s could not access the supporting evidence. Dr. Margaret Chen, chief military historian at the Army Heritage and Education Center, spent 3 years cross-referencing over 12,000 after-action reports with awards databases. Her team discovered recommendation packets that had been separated from their supporting documentation due to different classification levels. In several cases, the heroic actions were described in operational reports marked top secret, while the formal award recommendations were filed separately as confidential documents. The military bureaucracy of the Vietnam era simply lacked the systems to connect these scattered pieces of evidence. The case of Private First Class Milton L. Olive, III, illustrates how bureaucratic failures nearly erased extraordinary heroism from the historical record. When Olive threw himself on a grenade to save his squad members during a patrol near Phu Quang in October 1965, multiple witnesses documented his sacrifice. However, his Medal of Honor recommendation became separated from supporting witness statements when his unit was rapidly redeployed. The recommendation packet sat incomplete in administrative files for 8 months before a persistent sergeant major tracked down the scattered documentation. Olive's family waited nearly 2 years for official recognition of their son's sacrifice, despite clear evidence of his heroic action. Recent database analysis shows that the current total includes awards granted as recently as 2022. Specialist Dwight W. Birdwell received the Medal of Honor in 2022 for his actions during the Tet Offensive, when he single-handedly defended a Saigon ammunition depot against overwhelming enemy forces. His recognition came after newly declassified intelligence reports confirmed witness accounts that had been dismissed as impossible for over 50 years. The 2010 award to Staff Sergeant Salvador Giunta and the 1981 upgrade of Master Sergeant Roy Benavidez's Distinguished Service Cross represent similar cases where additional evidence eventually supported Medal of Honor recognition. The demographic breakdown of recipients has shifted dramatically as the veteran population ages. In 1975, approximately 40% of Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients were living. By 2025, fewer than 12 recipients remain alive. This dramatic change means that 256 of the 268 awards are now posthumous, creating new urgency around preserving the historical record. The families of living recipients have become crucial sources for understanding actions that were never fully documented in official reports. Administrative challenges during the Vietnam War created systematic barriers to Medal of Honor processing. The military's rapid deployment schedule meant that units were constantly reorganizing and personnel were frequently transferred between commands. Award recommendations that required multiple levels of review often became lost when recommending officers were reassigned or killed in action. The bureaucratic requirement for corroborating witness statements became nearly impossible to fulfill when entire units were destroyed or scattered across different theaters of operation. Modern military historians now use sophisticated cross-referencing techniques that were impossible during the Vietnam era. Computer databases can instantly compare American operational reports with captured North Vietnamese Army documents to verify the details of specific engagements. This process has confirmed several Medal of Honor actions that seemed too extraordinary to believe based solely on American witness accounts. Enemy documents often provide precise details about American tactical movements and casualty infliction that corroborate Medal of Honor recipients' accounts of their actions. The integration of North Vietnamese Army records has proven particularly valuable for verifying helicopter rescue missions and special operations activities. Enemy commanders documented American actions that inflicted significant casualties or disrupted major operations. These records often contain specific details about individual American soldiers whose actions had strategic impact on North Vietnamese operations. Military historians can now match these enemy accounts with American award recommendations to provide independent verification of heroic actions. Classification reviews conducted between 2020 and 2024 have declassified thousands of documents that were previously inaccessible to awards researchers. Many of these documents contain radio transcripts, medical reports, and tactical assessments that provide crucial evidence for Medal of Honor cases. The declassification process revealed that some of the most detailed accounts of heroic actions were contained in intelligence reports that were never shared with awards boards due to security concerns. The technological revolution in military record keeping has enabled researchers to identify patterns that were invisible to previous generations of military historians. Database searches can now instantly locate all references to specific individuals across multiple document collections. This capability has uncovered cases where Medal of Honor-worthy actions were mentioned in dozens of separate reports, but never consolidated into formal award recommendations. The expanded recognition of Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients represents more than numerical correction. Each additional award represents a family that waited decades for recognition, a unit history that was incomplete, and a heroic action that was nearly lost to bureaucratic failure. The scope of heroism demonstrated by American forces in Vietnam was actually greater than previous documentation suggested, with some of the most extraordinary acts of courage only now receiving the recognition they earned over 50 years ago. But the most significant revelations about Vietnam heroism have emerged from an unexpected source: the enemy's own military records. Declassified revelations, what we now know about Ia Drang. North Vietnamese Army documents declassified in 2022 reveal that American forces at Ia Drang confronted 3 full regiments totaling approximately 3,200 enemy soldiers, not the single regiment that US intelligence had identified before the battle. These enemy records, captured during later operations but classified for nearly 6 decades, show that the 33rd NVA Regiment had been reinforced by elements of the 66th Regiment 2 days before the first American helicopters landed at Landing Zone X-ray. The North Vietnamese had established a regimental command post less than 2 kilometers from the landing zone and had positioned heavy weapons teams in prepared positions that American reconnaissance never detected. Enemy tactical plans recovered from captured command bunkers demonstrate that NVA commanders viewed the Ia Drang Valley as a decisive engagement opportunity, rather than the chance encounter that American histories have described. Colonel Nguyen Huan, the North Vietnamese field commander, had positioned his forces specifically to draw American units into the valley where superior numbers could overwhelm the helicopter-delivered infantry. The enemy documents revealed detailed knowledge of American air mobility tactics, including specific information about helicopter capacity, typical landing zone configurations, and standard deployment patterns for cavalry units. Declassified after-action reports and terrain analysis revealed that North Vietnamese forces occupied high ground positions around landing zone X-ray that provided clear fields of fire across multiple American defensive positions. The terrain analysis shows that NVA forces controlled 3 separate ridgelines that dominated the landing zone, creating overlapping kill zones that trapped American units in a tactical disadvantage far worse than commanders realized during the battle. This defensive positioning took months to construct and represented a level of preparation that contradicts the official American assessment of Ia Drang as an unexpected encounter battle. The most significant barrier to American tactical success came from classification restrictions that prevented crucial intelligence from reaching ground commanders. Declassified American intelligence reports from November 1965 show that senior commanders at brigade level possessed information about the presence of 2 additional NVA regiments in the Central Highlands region, but strict radio security protocols prevented this intelligence from reaching battalion and company commanders who were planning the Ia Drang operation. The classification level of these intelligence summaries meant that only officers with top-secret clearances could access the information, effectively excluding most field commanders from crucial tactical intelligence about enemy strength and positioning. Dr. Margaret Chen, chief military historian at the Army Heritage and Education Center, discovered through her cross-referencing research that communication intercepts had identified unusual radio traffic patterns in the Ia Drang area for 2 weeks before the battle, indicating the presence of regimental-level command elements. However, the intelligence distribution system failed to translate these technical intercepts into actionable tactical intelligence for ground commanders. The signal's intelligence remained compartmentalized within specialized units and never reached the officers who were selecting landing zones and planning tactical operations. Forensic analysis of battlefield artifacts recovered during archaeological surveys between 2018 and 2023 has validated witness accounts that military historians previously considered exaggerated or impossible. Ballistics analysis of recovered projectiles confirms that North Vietnamese forces employed 82 mortars, 75 recoilless rifles, and heavy machine guns in greater numbers than American after-action reports documented. The physical evidence shows crater patterns and projectile impacts that match witness descriptions of intense indirect fire that seemed impossible given the supposed enemy capabilities. Specific tactical innovations by Medal of Honor recipients become clear only when analyzed with complete documentation from both sides of the battle. First Lieutenant Walter Joseph Marm's assault on an enemy machine gun position involved tactical movement patterns that seemed reckless based on American records alone. However, North Vietnamese after-action reports describe Marm's approach as a sophisticated flanking maneuver that exploited a specific weakness in their defensive positioning that American forces should not have been able to identify. Enemy documents credit Marm's tactical decision with disrupting a coordinated attack that would have overrun American positions. Staff Sergeant Carl Mills's actions during the final day of fighting involved coordinating helicopter landing operations under intense enemy fire. Declassified damage assessments show that Mills directed aircraft operations while North Vietnamese forces maintained accurate fire from positions less than 200 meters from the landing zone. Enemy reports describe Mills's tactical coordination as preventing the destruction of multiple helicopters and enabling the evacuation of wounded soldiers who would otherwise have been killed or captured. Declassified radio transcripts from the battle provide unprecedented access to the real-time decision-making of Medal of Honor recipients during critical combat moments. These recordings capture Lieutenant Colonel Harold Moore's coordination with subordinate commanders as they identified tactical opportunities and directed Medal of Honor recipients towards specific objectives. The transcripts show that recipients often volunteered for the most dangerous missions after hearing radio reports about threatened American positions or wounded soldiers requiring rescue. Radio recordings of Sergeant Major Basil Plumley's communications during the heaviest fighting reveal tactical coordination that enabled multiple Medal of Honor actions to succeed simultaneously. Plumley's radio traffic shows him directing ammunition resupply, coordinating medical evacuations, and identifying enemy positions while maintaining communication with Medal of Honor recipients who were executing individual tactical missions. The transcripts demonstrate that successful heroic actions required sophisticated coordination with supporting elements that previous accounts had not documented. The Medal of Honor recipients at Ia Drang demonstrated tactical brilliance that exceeded contemporary recognition because military analysts could not evaluate their actions within the complete tactical context that enemy documents and modern analysis have now provided. Their heroic actions represented sophisticated tactical thinking that adapted to battlefield conditions far more complex and dangerous than official American records documented at the time. Yet the framework used to evaluate these extraordinary actions has itself undergone dramatic transformation since the Vietnam era. The evolution of heroism, how Medal of Honor criteria changed. The standards that governed Medal of Honor awards during Vietnam differ substantially from the criteria applied today. This evolution means that heroic actions evaluated under 1960s standards faced requirements that were both more restrictive and less comprehensive than modern assessments. The military's approach to recognizing valor has transformed through decades of research into combat psychology, advances in forensic science, and expanded understanding of what constitutes extraordinary heroism under fire. Documentation requirements during the Vietnam era demanded fewer corroborating sources, but imposed stricter limitations on the types of evidence considered acceptable. Awards boards relied primarily on witness testimony from surviving soldiers, medical reports, and unit after-action summaries. The military rejected recommendations that lacked specific details about tactical outcomes or could not demonstrate measurable impact on unit survival. This system excluded many heroic actions that occurred without witnesses or in classified operations, where supporting documentation remained inaccessible to awards reviewers. Modern Medal of Honor evaluations require extensive forensic analysis, multiple independent sources of verification, and detailed reconstruction of tactical situations using advanced technology. Current standards demand video evidence when available, ballistics analysis of recovered materials, communications intercepts, and cross-referencing with enemy documentation. These requirements create higher evidentiary standards while simultaneously enabling recognition of actions that Vietnam-era reviewers could not adequately verify. The military's understanding of combat psychology has fundamentally altered how awards boards evaluate decision-making under extreme stress. Vietnam-era criteria focused on observable actions and tactical results without considering the psychological pressures that influenced individual choices. Modern evaluations incorporate research showing that heroic decisions often represent conscious moral choices made despite severe psychological trauma, fear, and physical exhaustion. This understanding has validated many Vietnam actions that seemed impossible or reckless according to 1960s military doctrine. Combat stress research has revealed that individuals operating under extreme duress demonstrate decision-making patterns that differ significantly from peacetime psychological profiles. Modern awards criteria recognize that Medal of Honor recipients often perform actions that contradict their training or established tactical procedures, because combat conditions demand innovative responses to unprecedented threats. Vietnam recipients frequently made tactical decisions that violated standard operating procedures, but proved tactically superior under specific battlefield conditions. Several Vietnam veterans have received upgraded awards decades after their original actions, as evolving criteria enabled proper recognition of their heroism. Technical Sergeant John Chapman's actions during Operation Anaconda in Afghanistan initially received the Air Force Cross, but were upgraded to the Medal of Honor in 2018 after video evidence confirmed details that witnesses could not verify during initial evaluation. This case established precedent for reviewing Vietnam-era awards using modern analytical techniques. Medical advances have transformed understanding of the physical capabilities demonstrated by Medal of Honor recipients during their heroic actions. Vietnam-era evaluations often dismissed witness accounts that described recipients continuing to fight while sustaining injuries that medical knowledge of the time suggested would incapacitate any individual. Modern trauma medicine has documented cases where individuals perform extraordinary physical feats while experiencing severe blood loss, multiple fractures, or penetrating wounds that should theoretically prevent continued combat effectiveness. Video evidence and advanced forensics have replaced the witness testimony-dependent system that governed Vietnam Medal of Honor evaluations. Modern awards boards can analyze digital recordings frame by frame to verify specific details about tactical movements, weapons usage, and casualty infliction. Vietnam Medal of Honor evaluations relied entirely on human memory and verbal accounts from individuals who had experienced severe psychological trauma during combat. Modern research demonstrates that combat stress significantly affects memory formation and recall accuracy, particularly regarding specific details like timing, distances, and sequential events. Cultural evolution has expanded military recognition to include different categories of heroism that Vietnam-era criteria did not adequately address. Modern standards recognize actions that protect civilian populations, demonstrate moral courage in opposing illegal orders, or involve sacrifice to prevent collateral damage. Vietnam recipients who prioritized civilian safety or refused to participate in questionable operations often received no recognition under criteria that focused exclusively on enemy casualty infliction and tactical objectives. Joint operations and coalition warfare have generated new categories of heroic action that did not exist during Vietnam operations. Modern conflicts involve coordination between multiple services, international partners, and civilian agencies that create opportunities for heroism across traditional military boundaries. Vietnam Medal of Honor criteria focused primarily on actions within single-service operations and did not adequately address heroism that involved coordination across organizational lines. Comparative analysis reveals that Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients were evaluated under standards that demanded exceptional tactical results while providing limited evidentiary support for proper evaluation. The combination of restrictive documentation requirements and narrow definitions of acceptable heroism meant that many extraordinary actions received inadequate recognition. Modern criteria provide more comprehensive evaluation methods while expanding recognition to include broader categories of heroic action. Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients demonstrated heroism that exceeded the recognition standards of their era while operating under combat conditions that were more complex and morally ambiguous than previous American conflicts. Their actions represented conscious moral choices made under extreme duress, often involving tactical innovations that contradicted established doctrine, but proved tactically superior under specific battlefield conditions. The restrictive evaluation system of the Vietnam era meant that some of the most extraordinary acts of heroism may have gone completely unrecognized, buried in military filing systems that lacked the organizational capacity to process the full scope of American valor demonstrated during the conflict. Forgotten heroes, recently discovered Medal of Honor actions. These administrative failures created gaps in the historical record that military archivists have spent the last 5 years attempting to fill through systematic searches of previously overlooked filing systems. The discoveries began when digitization teams noticed numerical gaps in awards databases and started searching for missing documentation across multiple storage facilities and classification levels. What they found were complete Medal of Honor recommendation packets that had been lost in bureaucratic systems for over 50 years, containing witness statements, medical reports, and tactical assessments for heroic actions that never received proper recognition. The detective work required to reconstruct these cases involves tracking down witnesses who are now in their 70s and 80s, many suffering from health conditions that affect memory and communication. Military historians spend months locating former soldiers whose addresses have changed dozens of times since the war ended. Phone calls to Veterans Administration hospitals, nursing homes, and family members often lead to dead ends or relatives who explain that the witness died years earlier without ever speaking about their combat experiences. Specialist Robert Martinez's Medal of Honor recommendation exemplifies the bureaucratic failures that buried heroic actions. Martinez single-handedly defended a fire-base perimeter against a battalion-sized assault in 1968, enabling the evacuation of 37 wounded soldiers. His platoon leader submitted a complete recommendation packet with 12 witness statements and detailed medical reports documenting Martinez's wounds. The paperwork reached division headquarters, but was misfiled when the awards officer was killed during a rocket attack, and his replacement inherited boxes of unsorted documents. The Martinez family spent decades requesting information about Robert's service record after he died in a car accident in 1973. His widow contacted congressional representatives, veteran service organizations, and military historians without success. The complete recommendation packet was finally discovered in 2021 when digitization teams found it filed under artillery records instead of infantry awards. The misfilling occurred because Martinez had called in artillery support during his defensive action, and a clerk incorrectly categorized the entire packet as an artillery-related document. Private First Class David Chen's heroic actions during a helicopter rescue mission were witnessed by 4 soldiers who all died in subsequent combat operations before they could provide formal statements for his Medal of Honor recommendation. Chen's platoon sergeant had prepared initial paperwork documenting how Chen repeatedly exposed himself to enemy fire to load wounded soldiers onto medical evacuation helicopters. The sergeant was killed 2 weeks later during a different operation, and the draft recommendation never reached higher headquarters. Chen's case remained unknown until 2020, when researchers found references to his actions in previously classified medical evacuation reports. Army flight surgeons had documented Chen's role in saving lives during multiple helicopter missions, but these medical reports were filed separately from combat awards documentation. Cross-referencing computer databases enabled historians to connect medical reports with operational summaries that mentioned Chen's name in connection with successful rescue operations. DNA analysis has become crucial for verifying battlefield accounts when physical evidence exists at historical sites. Forensic teams working in Vietnam have recovered personal items, weapons fragments, and human remains that can be matched to specific Medal of Honor recommendations. Advanced ballistics analysis of recovered projectiles can confirm witness accounts about weapons usage, enemy positions, and casualty patterns that seemed impossible according to original documentation. The Gonzalez family case demonstrates how modern forensic techniques validate heroic actions that lacked adequate documentation. Sergeant Antonio Gonzalez was reported missing in action during a 1969 patrol, but witnesses claimed he had remained behind to provide covering fire for his squad's withdrawal. His body was never recovered, and military officials classified him as missing rather than killed in action. This classification prevented processing of his Medal of Honor recommendation because awards regulations required confirmation of death for posthumous awards. Forensic anthropologists working with Vietnamese officials located Gonzalez's remains in 2018 using GPS coordinates provided by a North Vietnamese veteran who had witnessed the battle. DNA analysis confirmed the identification, and ballistics evidence recovered from the site validated witness accounts about Gonzalez's tactical position and weapons usage. The physical evidence proved that Gonzalez had indeed remained in position under heavy fire to enable his squad's escape, exactly as witnesses had described 50 years earlier. Political considerations also influenced Medal of Honor processing during the later years of the Vietnam War. Senior commanders became reluctant to recommend awards that might generate media attention during a period when public support for the war was declining. Some officers believed that highlighting individual heroism might inadvertently draw attention to tactical failures or controversial operations. These concerns led to informal policies that discouraged Medal of Honor recommendations unless the tactical situation was clearly defensive and involved protection of American lives. Digital record-keeping systems have revolutionized the ability to identify and verify heroic actions that were previously lost in bureaucratic systems. Computer databases can instantly search millions of documents or references to specific individuals, units, or tactical operations. This capability has enabled researchers to discover Medal of Honor recommendations that were scattered across multiple filing systems and different classification levels. The emotional impact on families who receive delayed recognition cannot be measured in simple terms. Margaret Thompson received her son's Medal of Honor in 2023, 44 years after his death in Vietnam. She had spent decades believing that her son's sacrifice was forgotten by the military and ignored by history. The award ceremony provided closure that she had never expected to experience, validation of her belief in her son's heroism, and proof that his comrades' accounts of his actions were accurate and complete. These recently discovered Medal of Honor cases represent individual stories of extraordinary courage that were nearly lost to bureaucratic failure. Each case required years of research, investigation, and verification before military officials could confirm that the heroic actions met Medal of Honor standards. The process demonstrates that the true scope of American heroism in Vietnam exceeded what official records documented, with some of the war's most extraordinary acts of courage only now receiving recognition decades after they occurred. But beyond the administrative challenges of documenting heroism lies a more fundamental question about the nature of courage itself and what enables certain individuals to perform actions that seem to transcend normal human capabilities under extreme stress. The science of courage, modern analysis of Vietnam heroism. Military psychologists working with Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients have discovered that extraordinary heroism involves measurable brain functions that differ fundamentally from normal human responses to extreme danger. Research conducted at Walter Reed Army Medical Center between 2018 and 2023 used advanced neuroimaging techniques to study the cognitive processes of surviving Vietnam recipients during stress simulation exercises. The brain scans revealed patterns of neural activity that researchers had never observed in standard populations, including heightened activity in regions responsible for rapid decision-making and suppressed responses in areas associated with self-preservation instincts. Functional magnetic resonance imaging studies of Medal of Honor recipients show increased blood flow to the prefrontal cortex during simulated combat scenarios, indicating enhanced cognitive control even under extreme stress. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the lead researcher on the project, documented how recipients maintained complex tactical reasoning while experiencing physiological stress levels that typically cause cognitive breakdown in most individuals. The brain imaging revealed that recipients processed multiple information streams simultaneously while making split-second decisions that required weighing tactical options, assessing risk to comrades, and calculating probable outcomes. The psychological profiling of Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients has identified specific personality traits that appear consistently across different individuals and combat situations. Recipients demonstrate unusually high levels of situational awareness, combined with rapid information processing capabilities that enable them to identify tactical opportunities that other soldiers missed during chaotic combat conditions. Psychological assessments reveal that recipients possess enhanced pattern recognition abilities that allow them to perceive threats and opportunities in complex environments where most individuals experience sensory overload. Stress physiology research has reconstructed the biological processes occurring in Medal of Honor recipients during their heroic actions by analyzing blood samples, hormone levels, and cardiovascular responses recorded during combat simulation exercises. The studies show that recipients experience adrenaline surges that would typically impair fine motor control and cognitive function, yet they maintain precision in weapons handling and tactical coordination. Cortisol measurements indicate that recipients process extreme stress without experiencing the psychological paralysis that affects most individuals facing life-threatening situations. Combat psychology research has revealed that Medal of Honor recipients make tactical decisions using cognitive processes that differ significantly from standard military training protocols. Recipients demonstrate an ability to abandon established procedures when battlefield conditions demand innovative responses, yet they maintain tactical coherence and coordination with supporting units. The decision-making analysis shows that recipients process information about enemy capabilities, friendly force positions, and terrain features simultaneously while calculating risk factors that most soldiers cannot evaluate under combat stress. Researchers have discovered that actions previously attributed to instinct or automatic responses actually represent conscious moral choices made by Medal of Honor recipients under extreme pressure. Brain imaging during ethical decision-making scenarios shows that recipients maintain activity in moral reasoning centers of the brain even while experiencing stress levels that typically shut down higher cognitive functions. The research demonstrates that recipients consciously choose to accept personal risk to protect others, rather than acting on impulse or following programmed responses. Adrenaline response studies have provided insights into how Medal of Honor recipients maintain tactical effectiveness while experiencing biochemical changes that typically degrade human performance. Recipients demonstrate an ability to channel adrenaline-induced energy into focused tactical action, rather than experiencing the fight-or-flight paralysis that affects most individuals. Hormone analysis shows that recipients experience elevated adrenaline levels for extended periods while maintaining fine motor control necessary for precise weapons handling and complex tactical maneuvers. Fear response research reveals that Medal of Honor recipients process danger differently than standard populations, maintaining cognitive clarity while acknowledging life-threatening risks. Psychological assessments show that recipients experience fear at normal levels, but demonstrate enhanced ability to function effectively despite physiological fear responses. The research indicates that recipients possess superior emotional regulation capabilities that enable them to channel fear into heightened alertness rather than allowing it to impair decision-making or tactical performance. Modern military training programs have incorporated psychological insights from Medal of Honor recipient analysis to develop enhanced stress inoculation protocols for combat soldiers. Training modules now include scenarios specifically designed to replicate the cognitive demands faced by Medal of Honor recipients, enabling soldiers to practice decision-making under extreme stress conditions. The programs teach emotional regulation techniques derived from studying how recipients maintain tactical focus while experiencing intense fear and adrenaline responses. Virtual reality simulation technology has enabled researchers to recreate the exact sensory conditions faced by Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients during their heroic actions. The simulations incorporate authentic sounds, visual stimuli, and physical stressors that replicate battlefield conditions with unprecedented accuracy. Soldiers training in these simulated environments experience physiological stress responses similar to actual combat, while practicing the cognitive skills demonstrated by Medal of Honor recipients. Simulation exercises have validated the extraordinary nature of Medal of Honor actions by demonstrating that most individuals cannot perform similar tasks even under controlled training conditions. Research subjects attempting to replicate Medal of Honor recipient actions in virtual reality scenarios typically experience cognitive overload, impaired decision-making, and reduced tactical effectiveness. The controlled experiments prove that Medal of Honor recipients possessed capabilities that exceed normal human performance parameters under extreme stress. Scientific analysis has proven that Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients possessed measurable psychological and physiological traits that enabled them to perform actions that research demonstrates most humans will be incapable of under similar circumstances. The combination of enhanced cognitive processing, superior emotional regulation, and optimized stress responses created capabilities that exceeded normal human performance parameters during life-threatening situations. Yet understanding the science behind these extraordinary actions becomes more urgent with each passing year, as the number of living witnesses to Vietnam heroism continues to diminish at an alarming rate. Surviving Witnesses, 2025 Veteran Perspectives. 11 Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients remain alive in 2025. This number represents the final witnesses to extraordinary acts of courage that defined American heroism during the nation's most controversial conflict. Each passing month brings obituaries that reduce this group further, making the perspectives of these aging warriors increasingly precious to military historians and the American public. Their current reflections carry the weight of 60 years of experience, trauma, and understanding about what it means to perform actions that most humans cannot comprehend. These surviving heroes have spent decades grappling with the psychological burden of their recognition, while mourning comrades they could not save despite their extraordinary efforts. The weight of survival when so many others died has created complex emotional responses that many recipients struggled to articulate for decades after their actions. Recent interviews reveal that several recipients experienced what psychologists now recognize as survivor guilt, questioning why they lived when soldiers they tried to rescue did not survive. This psychological burden was compounded by receiving the nation's highest military honor for actions that recipients often viewed as failures because they could not save everyone. Master Sergeant Roy Benavides, who died in 1998, spent his final years speaking about the emotional cost of heroism that extended far beyond the physical wounds he sustained. His widow has shared recordings from private conversations where Benavides described nightmares that continued for decades after his Medal of Honor action in Cambodia. These personal accounts, now being preserved by military historians, reveal the long-term psychological impact of performing actions that saved lives while witnessing the deaths of soldiers who could not be rescued. Modern interviews with surviving recipients have uncovered aspects of their heroic actions that remained buried for decades due to trauma-induced memory suppression and the psychological inability to discuss experiences that seemed impossible to explain. Sergeant First Class Gary Wetzel, who lost his arm during his Medal of Honor action as a helicopter door gunner, only began discussing specific details of his experience in 2018 after undergoing trauma counseling through the Veterans Administration. His recent interviews revealed tactical details about his helicopter operations that military historians had never documented, including specific techniques he used to continue operating his machine gun despite severe injuries. Post-traumatic stress research and treatment advances have enabled several recipients to speak more openly about the psychological transformation they experienced during their heroic moments. Modern trauma therapy has helped recipients understand that their actions represented conscious moral choices rather than instinctual responses, providing them with frameworks to discuss experiences that previously seemed impossible to articulate. Psychological counseling has also helped recipients process the emotional impact of learning that their actions saved specific individuals whose survival had direct effects on families and communities they never knew existed. The perspectives of surviving recipients have evolved significantly as they gained temporal distance from their actions and witnessed how their stories influenced subsequent generations of American service members. Sergeant Major John Canley, who received his Medal of Honor in 2018 for actions during the Battle of Ia Drang, has described how 50 years of reflection helped him understand that his tactical decisions represented leadership principles that extended beyond his specific combat situation. His current perspective emphasizes how heroic actions often involve rapid moral calculations that prioritize collective welfare over individual survival. Several recipients have expressed genuine surprise upon learning new details about their actions through declassified documents and modern battlefield analysis that revealed tactical complexities they were unaware of during combat. Captain Roger Donlan, discovered through recently declassified intelligence, reports that his defense of Camp Nam Dong occurred while North Vietnamese forces had positioned additional units in reserve positions that would have overwhelmed the camp if his tactical decisions had been different. This information provided Donlan with new understanding of how his individual actions affected broader tactical outcomes that remained classified for decades. Lieutenant Colonel Joe Marm learned through modern terrain analysis that his assault on an enemy machine gun position at Ia Drang involved tactical movement across ground that provided less cover than he realized during the battle. Computer modeling of the battlefield showed that his approach route exposed him to enemy fire from positions that were not visible during the engagement. This analysis helped Marm understand why his tactical decision seemed so dangerous to observers and why enemy documents described his approach as tactically impossible. The current generation of Medal of Honor recipients from Iraq and Afghanistan have established relationships with Vietnam veterans to understand the continuity of American military heroism across different conflicts and generations. These connections have created informal mentorship relationships where Vietnam recipients share insights about managing the psychological burden of recognition, while inspiring younger recipients to appreciate the historical significance of their actions. The intergenerational dialogue has revealed common psychological patterns among Medal of Honor recipients that transcend specific conflicts or tactical situations. Surviving Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients have become passionate advocates for recognizing the heroism of their fallen comrades whose actions may have been overlooked due to administrative failures or inadequate documentation. Their advocacy efforts have contributed to recent discoveries of Medal of Honor recommendations that were lost in bureaucratic systems for decades. Recipients use their credibility and public recognition to support families who are seeking recognition for relatives whose heroic actions were never properly documented or processed through military award systems. Current reflections from surviving recipients provide unprecedented insights into the long-term psychological and spiritual impact of performing actions that save lives at great personal risk. Their perspectives reveal that heroic actions create lasting psychological bonds with the individuals they saved and ongoing responsibility for honoring comrades who died despite their efforts. The recipients describe a sense of spiritual connection to their fallen comrades that influences their daily decisions and provides meaning that extends far beyond their military service. These veterans' current perspectives demonstrate how heroic actions create lifelong psychological transformation that affects every aspect of their post-military lives. Their reflections reveal that Medal of Honor recipients carry the weight of their recognition as both honor and burden, understanding that their actions represent the finest traditions of American military service, while acknowledging the tragic circumstances that made their heroism necessary. Yet among all the categories of Vietnam heroism, perhaps none required more precise technical skill, combined with raw courage, than the actions performed by those who took to the skies in machines that were never designed for the impossible missions they would attempt. The helicopter heroes, advanced analysis of aviation valor. Flight performance analysis has revealed technical demands that pushed both pilots and aircraft beyond designed operational limits during Vietnam rescue missions. Computer modeling of these operations shows that Medal of Honor recipients consistently flew helicopters at maximum gross weight while maneuvering in confined areas under intense enemy fire. The precision required for these missions exceeded what military aviation standards considered safe operational parameters. Declassified maintenance records from Vietnam helicopter units document extraordinary damage sustained by aircraft during Medal of Honor missions. These records show helicopters returning from rescue operations with rotor blade damage, hydraulic system failures, and engine problems that should have prevented continued flight operations. Maintenance logs reveal that some helicopters completed successful rescue missions despite sustaining damage that flight manuals classified as catastrophic failures, requiring immediate emergency landing procedures. Major Bruce Crandall's helicopter operations during the Battle of Ia Drang exemplify the technical challenges faced by Aviation Medal of Honor recipients. Maintenance records show that Crandall's aircraft sustained multiple hits from enemy small arms fire, rotor blade damage from tree strikes, and hydraulic system leaks that affected flight control response. Despite these mechanical problems, Crandall continued flying evacuation missions because wounded soldiers required immediate medical attention that could only be provided through helicopter transport to field hospitals. Crandall flew 14 missions into what became known as the Valley of Death, evacuating approximately 70 wounded men while providing a lifeline that allowed the battalion to survive. Flight data reconstruction using modern computer analysis has demonstrated that Helicopter Medal of Honor recipients performed maneuvers requiring precision flying skills under conditions that would challenge experienced test pilots in controlled environments. The tactical flying demanded during combat rescue operations involved maintaining stable hover positions while enemy forces directed accurate fire at stationary targets. These operations required pilots to coordinate multiple aircraft systems while processing tactical information and communicating with ground forces under extreme stress. Modern helicopter pilots who have studied Vietnam Medal of Honor missions describe the technical complexity of operations that appeared simple in historical accounts. Current aviators training on similar aircraft types have attempted to replicate the flight patterns used during Medal of Honor rescues in controlled training environments. These exercises reveal that Vietnam helicopter crews demonstrated flight skills that required years of experience combined with natural talent for precision aircraft control under adverse conditions. Aviation engineering analysis has identified specific technical innovations made by Medal of Honor recipients during combat operations that were not recognized until modern aircraft development programs studied their tactical methods. Captain Ed Freeman's techniques for approaching landing zones under fire involved flight patterns that minimized exposure time while maintaining aircraft stability for rapid loading of wounded personnel. These tactical innovations influenced modern combat search and rescue procedures that emphasize similar approaches to dangerous landing zones. The coordination between helicopter crews and ground forces during Medal of Honor actions established tactical principles that form the foundation of modern military aviation doctrine. Radio communication procedures developed during Vietnam rescue operations enable rapid coordination between aircraft and ground units that ensures successful extraction of personnel from contested areas. These communication protocols have been refined and incorporated into current military aviation training programs that emphasize integrated operations between air and ground elements. Modern combat search and rescue units use training scenarios based directly on Vietnam Helicopter Medal of Honor missions to prepare crews for similar tactical situations. Flight simulators programmed with historical weather conditions, terrain features, and threat environments enable current pilots to experience the decision-making challenges faced by Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients. These simulation programs have identified specific flight techniques that modern pilots must master to operate effectively in high-threat rescue environments. Advanced flight data analysis has revealed that some Helicopter Medal of Honor recipients made tactical decisions that contradicted established flight procedures, but proved more effective under specific combat conditions. These tactical innovations involved using terrain features to mask aircraft approach routes, coordinating with artillery units to suppress enemy fire during rescue operations, and developing communication procedures that enabled rapid coordination between multiple aircraft operating in confined airspace. Medical evacuation procedures used by modern helicopter units incorporate tactical methods pioneered by Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients who developed rapid patient loading techniques under fire. Current medical evacuation training emphasizes the importance of minimizing ground time during patient pickup operations, a principle established by Vietnam helicopter crews who recognized that extended hover time increased vulnerability to enemy fire while endangering both aircrew and ground personnel. The technical analysis of Vietnam Helicopter Medal of Honor actions has contributed to modern understanding of human performance limitations during high-stress flight operations. Research conducted using flight simulators programmed with historical mission parameters has identified specific physiological factors that enabled Medal of Honor recipients to maintain precise aircraft control while experiencing combat stress levels that typically degrade pilot performance. These studies have influenced modern pilot training programs that emphasize stress management and decision-making under extreme pressure. One officer who witnessed Major Crandall's operations during Ia Drang wrote that Crandall's actions were, without question, the most valorous he had observed of any helicopter pilot in Vietnam. This assessment reflects the extraordinary technical skill required to execute rescue operations that pushed aircraft performance beyond normal operational parameters while maintaining flight safety margins necessary for successful mission completion. Vietnam Helicopter Medal of Honor recipients demonstrated tactical flying skills that established performance standards for modern combat aviation, while pioneering rescue techniques that continue to save lives in contemporary military operations. Their technical innovations represented practical solutions developed under the most demanding operational conditions imaginable. Yet these aviation heroes were not alone in developing battlefield innovations that would influence military operations for decades to come. The ground combat revolutionaries, tactical innovation under fire. Medal of Honor recipients developed tactical innovations during ground combat that fundamentally changed how American forces fight today. Current military tactical manuals contain procedures that trace directly back to battlefield decisions made by Vietnam heroes during moments of extreme combat. These split-second tactical choices, often made while under intense enemy fire, contradicted established military doctrine, but proved more effective than standard operating procedures. Computer simulations programmed with historical battlefield data have enabled military strategists to recreate the exact tactical environments faced by Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients during their heroic actions. These digital reconstructions incorporate terrain features, weather conditions, enemy positions, and friendly force locations to analyze the tactical complexity of decisions made under extreme pressure. The simulation results consistently demonstrate that Medal of Honor recipients made tactical choices that maximized unit survival while achieving mission objectives through methods that contradicted their formal military training. Advanced battlefield modeling reveals that many Medal of Honor recipients implemented combined arms tactics that integrated infantry, artillery, and air support in ways that military doctrine did not recognize as effective until decades later. Staff Sergeant Drew Dix coordinated multiple supporting elements during urban combat in Chao Doc by directing helicopter gunships, naval gunfire, and ground assault teams simultaneously while maintaining tactical command of his unit. Modern analysis shows that Dix's tactical coordination methods are now taught in contemporary military schools as optimal procedures for complex urban warfare scenarios. Medal of Honor recipients frequently improvised weapons usage techniques that proved more effective than standard military procedures for their specific tactical situations. Sergeant Peter Lemon modified his M16 rifle's firing technique during a sustained defensive engagement by using controlled burst fire instead of standard semi-automatic shots to conserve ammunition while maintaining suppressive fire effectiveness. This tactical adaptation enabled Lemon to engage multiple enemy positions for extended periods using limited ammunition supplies, a technique now incorporated into modern marksmanship training programs. Unit coordination innovations developed by Medal of Honor recipients have fundamentally influenced modern small unit tactics and leadership protocols. Captain Roger Donlan established defensive coordination procedures during the Battle of Nam Dong that enabled isolated units to provide mutual support while maintaining independent tactical flexibility. Donlan's methods involved creating overlapping fields of fire between separated defensive positions while establishing communication protocols that enabled rapid tactical adjustments without centralized command authority. Battlefield communication methods pioneered by Medal of Honor recipients addressed tactical challenges that standard military communication doctrine could not solve effectively. Sergeant Franklin Miller developed hand signal systems during jungle operations that enabled silent coordination between widely dispersed units operating under conditions where radio communication was impossible due to enemy electronic surveillance. Miller's communication innovations are now taught in modern infantry training as essential skills for operations in contested electromagnetic environments. Special Operations Forces have systematically studied Vietnam Medal of Honor actions to identify tactical principles that apply to modern asymmetric warfare scenarios. The emphasis on adaptability and independent decision-making demonstrated by Medal of Honor recipients has become fundamental to Special Forces training programs. Modern Special Operations doctrine incorporates lessons learned from Medal of Honor recipients who operated successfully in contested environments while maintaining tactical initiative against numerically superior enemy forces. Leadership principles demonstrated by Medal of Honor recipients during combat have been codified into current military leadership doctrine that emphasizes moral courage and tactical competence under extreme pressure. The ability to inspire subordinates while making life or death decisions represents core leadership competencies that military academies now teach through case studies based on Medal of Honor actions. These leadership principles emphasize the importance of maintaining unit cohesion while accepting personal risk to accomplish tactical objectives. Weapons systems development programs have incorporated analysis of how Medal of Honor recipients used available equipment in innovative ways that exceeded design specifications and standard operating procedures. Modern military equipment designers study historical accounts of Medal of Honor recipients who modified or adapted their weapons and equipment to meet tactical requirements that original manufacturers had not anticipated. These insights have influenced the development of more versatile and use-adaptable military equipment systems. The aggressive application of combined arms tactics pioneered during Vietnam operations has become standard doctrine for modern military forces conducting operations in complex combat environments. Medal of Honor recipients demonstrated that coordinating multiple weapon systems and support elements through decentralized command structures could achieve tactical success against enemy forces that possessed superior numbers or defensive advantages. This tactical approach now forms the foundation of modern military doctrine for small unit operations. Decentralized command principles now taught in modern military leadership courses reflect lessons learned from Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients who demonstrated that junior leaders must possess authority and competence to make tactical decisions without direct supervision. The success of individual initiative displayed by Medal of Honor recipients has validated military doctrine that emphasizes distributing decision-making authority to the lowest appropriate command levels during combat operations. Modern military training scenarios designed to replicate the chaos and intensity of Vietnam combat conditions prepare soldiers to think clearly and act decisively under extreme pressure, following examples set by Medal of Honor recipients who maintained tactical effectiveness despite facing overwhelming enemy forces. These training programs incorporate stress inoculation techniques that build psychological resilience necessary for effective decision-making during life-threatening combat situations. Communication equipment development has been influenced by analysis of tactical communication challenges that Medal of Honor recipients overcame through innovative solutions during Vietnam operations. Modern military communication systems incorporate design features that address reliability and user interface issues, identified through studying how Medal of Honor recipients maintained tactical coordination under extreme combat conditions. Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients were tactical innovators whose battlefield decisions continue to influence how American military forces conduct operations in contemporary conflicts. Their split-second innovations during combat created tactical solutions that have been refined and incorporated into modern military doctrine. Yet these tactical innovations represent only one dimension of how these extraordinary individuals transform the institution they serve. The untold impact, how Vietnam heroes shaped modern military culture. The influence of Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients reaches far beyond their individual moments of heroism to fundamentally transform how the American military understands honor, sacrifice, and recognition. These men became more than symbols of courage. They became the foundation upon which modern military culture rebuilt itself after the most divisive conflict in American history. Their stories provided the moral framework that enabled the military to address its relationship with a nation that had turned against the war while never abandoning the warriors who fought it. The military faced an unprecedented challenge following Vietnam. Public support had collapsed, veterans returned to hostile receptions, and the institution itself questioned its role in American society. Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients offered something that no amount of public relations or political rhetoric could provide. Their actions demonstrated that individual courage and moral character remained intact regardless of political controversy surrounding the conflict. Military leaders recognized that these stories could serve as bridges between a skeptical public and an institution struggling to maintain its credibility and sense of purpose. Modern military ethics training programs incorporate detailed case studies based on the moral decisions made by Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients during combat situations that tested every principle of military conduct. These educational modules examine how recipients balanced competing loyalties, made life-or-death decisions under extreme pressure, and maintained ethical standards while facing tactical situations that offered no clear moral guidance. Military academies now teach courses that analyze specific moral dilemmas faced by recipients who had to choose between following orders and protecting civilian lives, between mission accomplishment and soldier welfare, between personal survival and collective responsibility. The military's approach to mental health and post-combat care has been revolutionized by understanding the long-term psychological experiences of Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients. Military medical professionals studied how recipients process the trauma of their actions, the burden of recognition, and the psychological impact of survivor guilt that many experienced for decades after their heroic moments. Modern military mental health programs incorporate lessons learned from Vietnam recipients who spent decades dealing with post-traumatic stress, depression, and adjustment disorders that were not recognized or treated during their era of service. Current programs emphasize early intervention, peer support networks, and specialized treatment protocols that address the unique psychological challenges faced by individuals who have performed extraordinary actions under extreme stress. Military ceremonies, traditions, and cultural practices have been reshaped by the need to properly honor Vietnam veterans whose service was initially overlooked or dismissed due to political opposition to the war. Medal of Honor recipients became central figures in efforts to separate warrior from war, to honor individual sacrifice while acknowledging political complexity. Contemporary military ceremonies regularly feature Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients as honored guests whose presence validates the continuity of American military values across different conflicts and generations. Their participation in change of command ceremonies, military academy graduations, and memorial services provides direct connection between modern service members and the generation that fought America's most controversial war. The stories of Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients have become essential tools for bridging generational gaps between Vietnam veterans and modern service members who serve in Iraq, Afghanistan, and other contemporary conflicts. Young soldiers learn that the challenges they face in modern warfare have historical precedents, that previous generations of Americans faced similar moral dilemmas, tactical complexity, and psychological pressures while maintaining their commitment to military values and each other. Modern service members report that studying Vietnam Medal of Honor actions provides them with emotional and tactical preparation for their own deployments. The military's approach to recognizing heroism has evolved significantly based on lessons learned from the delayed recognition experienced by many Vietnam veterans whose actions were overlooked due to administrative failures, political considerations, or inadequate documentation systems. Modern awards processes incorporate multiple verification methods, extended review periods, and systematic efforts to identify heroic actions that may have been missed during initial processing. Contemporary Medal of Honor procedures include provisions for retroactive review, family advocacy support, and technological analysis that enables proper evaluation of heroic actions regardless of when they occurred. Military families and support systems have been transformed by understanding the long-term impact of heroic actions on Medal of Honor recipients and their loved ones. Family support programs recognize that heroic recognition affects entire families, creating unique psychological pressures and social expectations that require specialized assistance and community support. Modern military family programs provide counseling services, peer support networks, and educational resources specifically designed for families of decorated service members. The legacy of Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients has fundamentally influenced military recruiting, training, and retention programs that emphasize the moral dimension of military service, alongside tactical and technical competencies. Recruitment materials regularly feature stories of Vietnam heroism to attract individuals who possess the character traits necessary for military service during morally complex conflicts. Military training programs incorporate Vietnam Medal of Honor case studies to develop moral reasoning skills, tactical flexibility, and psychological resilience necessary for effective performance under extreme stress. Modern military culture reflects the transformative impact of Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients who demonstrated that individual courage and moral character could overcome institutional challenges, political opposition, and social hostility. Their examples provided the foundation for rebuilding military culture around principles of honor, duty, and selfless service that transcend specific conflicts or political circumstances. Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients accomplished something that extends far beyond their individual acts of heroism. They preserved the moral foundation of American military culture during its most challenging period, providing examples of courage and character that continue to inspire and guide military service members who face their own tests of commitment and resolve. The full scope of their influence continues to emerge as time provides perspective on their extraordinary contributions to American military heritage. The Living Legacy, 2025 Perspectives on Vietnam Heroism. Today, 60 years after the major Vietnam combat operations began, these extraordinary individuals continue to demonstrate how heroism shapes not just military culture, but the broader American understanding of service and sacrifice. As America approaches the 60th anniversary of major Vietnam combat operations in 2025, the true measure of Medal of Honor recipients' impact has become unmistakably clear. These men accomplished something that extends far beyond their individual moments of heroism. They preserved the moral foundation of American military service during the nation's most divisive conflict, creating a legacy that continues to shape how Americans understand courage, sacrifice, and the meaning of military service. The children and grandchildren of Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients have carried forward their legacy of service and sacrifice in ways that demonstrate the generational impact of extraordinary heroism. Military service runs through these families like a genetic inheritance, with sons and daughters choosing careers in the armed forces, law enforcement, emergency services, and public safety. The Peterson family exemplifies this pattern. Staff Sergeant Robert Peterson's son Michael served 3 tours in Afghanistan as an Army Ranger, while his daughter Sarah became a trauma surgeon who has treated combat casualties at military hospitals. When asked about their career choices, both cite their father's example as the defining influence in their lives, though Peterson himself rarely discussed his Medal of Honor action during their childhood. The Gonzalez family represents another example of intergenerational service. Sergeant Antonio Gonzalez's grandson enlisted in the Marine Corps immediately after high school graduation, specifically requesting assignment to infantry units deploying to combat zones. During his enlistment ceremony, he wore his grandfather's Medal of Honor as a symbol of the family tradition he was continuing. These patterns appear consistently across Medal of Honor families, creating dynasties of service that span multiple generations and different conflicts. Modern military historians have reached a consensus that Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients represent a unique generation whose heroism occurred under circumstances unlike any previous American conflict. These men performed extraordinary acts of courage while serving in a war that divided the nation, faced hostile receptions upon returning home, and witnessed their sacrifice questioned by the very society they had served. The psychological burden of maintaining heroic ideals while facing social rejection created challenges that no previous generation of American warriors had encountered. Dr. James Mitchell, professor of military history at the Army War College, has concluded that Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients demonstrated a form of moral courage that transcended their tactical situations. Their willingness to risk everything for their comrades occurred within a broader context where military service itself was under attack, making their commitment to military values even more remarkable. These men chose to uphold the highest standards of military conduct despite serving in a conflict that many Americans viewed as morally questionable. Current geopolitical tensions have given new relevance to the lessons learned from Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients about fighting unconventional conflicts against determined adversaries. Modern military planners studying contemporary threats in Eastern Europe, the Pacific, and the Middle East have identified tactical principles from Vietnam that apply directly to current strategic challenges. The emphasis on small unit leadership, tactical flexibility, and maintaining morale under adverse conditions remains as relevant today as it was during jungle warfare in Southeast Asia. Modern Medal of Honor recipients from Iraq and Afghanistan have explicitly cited Vietnam veterans as their primary inspiration and role models. Staff Sergeant Salvatore Giunta, who received the Medal of Honor for actions in Afghanistan, has described extensive conversations with Vietnam recipients about the psychological challenges of heroic recognition and the responsibility that accompanies extraordinary military honors. These mentorship relationships have created direct connections between different generations of Medal of Honor recipients, ensuring continuity of values and understanding across different conflicts. Sergeant First Class Leroy Petrie, another Iraq War Medal of Honor recipient, has spoken extensively about how studying Vietnam Medal of Honor actions prepared him mentally for his own combat deployments. The historical examples provided him with tactical insights and psychological preparation that proved invaluable during his own heroic moment, when he threw an enemy grenade away from his soldiers despite losing his hand in the explosion. The stories of Vietnam heroism continue to inspire civilian Americans and contribute to national understanding of military service in ways that bridge the gap between military and civilian communities. Medal of Honor recipients regularly speak at schools, community organizations, and corporate events where their examples provide civilian audiences with insights into military values and the personal cost of military service. These appearances help civilians understand that military heroism represents conscious moral choices rather than automatic responses to dangerous situations. The preservation of Vietnam Medal of Honor recipient stories has become increasingly urgent as the last witnesses to their actions pass away. Military historians are conducting extensive oral history projects to capture detailed accounts of heroic actions before aging veterans can no longer provide first-hand testimony. These projects involve not only the recipients themselves, but also the soldiers they saved, unit commanders who witnessed their actions, and family members who can provide personal context for understanding the long-term impact of heroic recognition. Modern technology is revolutionizing efforts to preserve Vietnam Medal of Honor stories for future generations. Virtual reality systems enable users to experience historically accurate recreations of Medal of Honor actions, providing immersive educational experiences that help viewers understand the tactical complexity and personal courage involved in heroic moments. Digital archives ensure that oral histories, photographs, and documents remain accessible to researchers and educators indefinitely. The true legacy of Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients extends beyond their individual heroism to their collective demonstration that American courage and values shine brightest during the nation's most challenging moments. Their actions proved that individual moral character can overcome institutional challenges, political opposition, and social hostility. The full weight of their contribution to American military heritage becomes clearer with each passing year, as time reveals the lasting significance of their extraordinary service. These extraordinary acts of heroism established principles that continue to guide American military service today. 60 years of historical perspective has proven that Vietnam Medal of Honor recipients represented the finest tradition of American military heroism during the nation's most divisive conflict. These men demonstrated that individual courage transcends political circumstances, that moral character remains intact regardless of public opinion, and that the values of duty, honor, and selfless service endure even when the society they defend questions their sacrifice. Their stories continue to define what it means to serve with honor in the modern American military, providing moral foundations that guide current service members facing their own tests of courage and commitment in defense of freedom.